This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. Shalom Aleichem. We continue in the Iggeres HaMussar of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Rabbi Yisrael was learning that, Rabbi Yisrael was teaching that even if a person learns Mussar, there are certain Averos that have become so downgraded in our consciousness and in our perspective that they're no longer on the same level as other Averos. For instance, when it comes to nevela, treifa, non-kosher food, everyone is so distant and everyone is so careful to stay far away. And when it comes to gezela or lashon hara, one may have violated Aver so many times that it does not have the same severity in one's eyes. And Rabbi Yisrael taught that really the very potent and very direct way to restore the level of severity in our minds is by learning the halachos of that inyan in depth. And Rabbi Yisrael says that it will begin to affect us slowly, to strengthen our soul, to guard ourselves from the sha'ol tachtis. At least if we're going to do the aveira, we won't do it lahaches until it will strengthen us even more, that by involving ourselves in the halachos that are relevant to that aveira, it will change our nature. The word I was looking for was neuroplasticity. It creates new pathways in the brain. It changes a person's nature that it will not bring us to violate any further. Now Rabbi Yisrael has a footnote, sort of a lamdasha footnote. Rabbi Yisrael says as follows. Let's see if we could follow this. At least at first, it will help us guard against situations where the Yetzer Hara is not so strong. Like we find in the Gemara in Chulin on Daf Daled, b'mumar l'teyavain, someone who's a mumar out of desire. So he's not a mumar lahachis; it's a mumar l'teyavain. He for monetary reasons, or he enjoys the food. Shehachametz shahoy bebeis Pesach. The chametz was in his house on Pesach. Va'over al bal yirah. So what will he do? Machlifa achara Pesach lahakel ha'isser. He will exchange it after Pesach to lighten and lower the isser. You hear what's going on? You have a guy, he couldn't help himself. He loves pizza so much. I know people like that. Pizza lovers. He can't help himself. He eats pizza over Pesach. He has pies of pizza. After Pesach, what he'll do is he'll exchange it for other chametz to lighten the isser. Now, Rav Goldberg says that Rabbi Yisrael is learning the sugya there like Rashi, the way Tosfos quotes him, that for the person themselves to exchange chametz shavar leva Pesach for a new chametz, it's still an isser d'oraisa, but he'll exchange it because at least la'achirim it becomes mutter. So the question is, but what does the guy gain? Chassam Sofer explains it's not as despicable because you're not being nene from the guf ha'isser, even though they're both asr midaraisa and there's no difference, but at least it's not as despicable when you exchange it, as opposed to Tosfos Shita, that when you exchange it, it's only now an isser d'rabanan. Now, here you have a mumar l'teyavain, but at least he'll try to lighten the isser. We could assume the person will still do this. So it's a madrego to be a mumar l'teyavain. A mumar l'hachas wouldn't do this, but a mumar l'teyavain would try to lighten the isser. But ve'ech loy boish ulvavenu bal yimas kamayim. How can we not be ashamed and our heart not melt like water? B'roisenu shiflos nafshenu. By looking at how lowly our souls are. Neged doros rishonim, relative to the earlier generations. HaMussar lefanim, the Mumar of yesteryear. Asher hechzik chametz bepesach bebeisai, that kept chametz in his house on Pesach. The Mumar of back in the day, he had a natural spiritual acquisition to try to lighten the isur in something he doesn't have a taiva for. In other words, he has a taiva to eat pizza on Pesach, but he doesn't have a taiva when Pesach is over, dafki to eat this food, he could exchange it. So since that's not something that he has a taiva for, he'll try to mitigate. But in our generations, Rabim, anachnu noiflim begeder lahachis. We today are no longer mumar l'te'avon. We don't sin just because we desire. We sin lahachis. So really? But we're from Jews. We eat potato kugel on Shabbos. So how can you say we're mumar lahachis? We even maybe don't eat gebraks on Pesach. We're mumarim lahachis. Yes, says Rabbi Yisrael. The averos that we're morgul in, the averos that we do regularly, no loinosim leiv lahachlif tavaisenu bahen lahakel ha'isar. We don't even pay attention to exchange our taiva to lighten the isser. In other words, those averos that we do habitually, if we have an opportunity perhaps to do it a lesser severity, we're not going to do that. You know why? Because regarding the averos we commit habitually, we have no emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and no emunah in schar va'onesh. That's the madrega that we're on today. Back in the day, the guy who ate chametz on Pesach, he knew he was going to go into an oven. He's going to face consequences, and therefore he tried to lighten it. We don't do that, because regarding what we're lacking, the averos we're habitual in, we don't have a emunah in yanim haruchaniyim. And therefore, that means we sin not l'te'avon. We're not doing it because we want to sin. We just sin because we don't believe God is watching us, and we don't believe He's going to punish us. Yeah, maybe certain things we do, but other things we block it out of our head. And we've successfully relegated certain areas of our avodah to, we've lost emunah completely. And therefore, it's interesting, even though we're not doing it to anger Hashem. So you would think, I'm not doing it to anger Hashem, so it's not a mumar l'hachas. No, mumar l'hachas doesn't mean I'm doing it to anger. Mumar l'hachas means anytime I sin, when I have no taiva to sin. And the proof that we sin when we have no taiva is when the opportunity presents itself to mitigate it. We don't take advantage of that. V'ra'asenu rabba, our evil is great. Kedin mumar lahachis. Like Rav Goldberg quotes Rashi, that what's mumar l'te'avon? If somebody doesn't have meat, he'll eat nevelo treifa. But he's not mufgar that isser v'heter if they're both in front of you. In other words, a mumar lahachis is if you have a piece of non-kosher, and you could get kosher, if you don't take advantage of it, it's a mumar lahachis. Even though you're not doing it to anger Hashem. So you're not doing it for the taiva of the achila. Anytime you're sinning, not because of the taiva, just because that's mumar lahachis. And the Alter of Kelm writes in his Kabbalos of Yom Kippur of the year 1893. He says, let a person not say, I am clean from being a mumar lahachis. No. The geder of lahachis is, if you could do it beheter and you do it be'isser, says the Alter of Kelm, how frightening it is that it's much easier for a person to be in that category than one may think. Says Rabbi Yisrael, even halachically, this status that we may be mumar lahachis has changed bizman hazeh. Like the Bach writes in Yardei Siman Beis. Here's what the Bach says: Mumar oichal nevel l'te'avon, a mumar who eats nevel l'te'avon. V'nira da'achshav bizmanenu mishu chashad lechal nevel l'te'avon. If somebody is suspect of eating a nevela because he's hungry, then you cannot eat anything of his. What do you mean? But we know he only sins l'te'avon. Nowadays, you can't rely on the person for anything. Somebody who sins l'te'avon is suspect even to be nichshal shaloi l'te'avon. Even though before us he's only been established to be someone who is oichel l'teyavon. Umikol shekain shalilitain leisakin badak. Certainly don't give him a check knife. Lishchay teshech v'lecha mishchitasen to eat from mishchita. Shahaya mutter midina de Gemara. According to Dina de Gemara, mumar l'teyavon, you're allowed to eat from mishchita, because nowadays a mumar l'teyavon has almost the status of mumar lahaches. Umisha oisa davar zebecha mumar yechashiv l'chol mili. Basically, Rabbi Yisrael's point is a frightening one. And that is, if there are averos in our repertoire that have become so habitual, don't say, well, it's a mumar l'teyavon. No, because regarding those averos, even when we have an opportunity to mitigate it and to avoid it, we don't usually try to, and that has a status of mumar lahaches in one inyan. And the question is, so how do we fix that? And that's what we're learning. The best effort to fix that is to learn that specific area in depth. I'm very gratified. From this Seder, somebody contacted me that they were looking into a specific Sefer to be able to learn a certain inyan, be'iyun, and that's really the greatest weapon against the Yetzer Hara. And just even starting that is already demonstrating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that no, even if sometimes I might stumble, but it's certainly not lahachis, because once you're taking the medication, you're already on the path to full recovery, so to speak. So that's really the great gift of Rabbi Yisrael. And if we could really locate those areas in our life that we are habitual, and most, if not all of us, have those areas, and we could even dedicate a small amount of time to learn that area in depth, that is a great Yeshua, and it will bring us great salvation. Okay, my rabbis, have a great day. See everybody tomorrow. Thanks for joining. If anybody wants to join our trip to Mekayimos Kedoshim in next weekend, please sign up. We'll be very grateful to have you. Okay, everyone? Bracha v'atzlacha. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.